more than half the people they can't even afford in their mind to put energy into something that doesn't pay them 2 weeks from now. They have to be doing something all the time. It's hand to mouth. It's like everybody's a bunch of crackheads. And I say that lovingly, but we are.
Financial independence,
freedom,
financial picture,
independent financially,
financial future,
financial freedom and wealth,
financial independence.
Get your fill, financial independence and long life. Hey, welcome back to another episode of Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life, where we explore awesome ways to achieve those two goals. People come on to help us who are just giving, caring, cool, interesting people, including today, we have Damion Lupo with us today. He is the author, the best-selling author of 12 books on money, which, why do you want to read any other kind of book? And he hosts the weekly Financial Underdogs podcast. Over the last 30 years, he's started more than 70 companies. God, that's more than me. Taking them from 0 figures, which is where we all love to begin, to 7, 8, and 9 figures. And now he's closing in on his first unicorn with Frametec, which is currently valued north of $500 million after less than 2 years. Holy crap. Damon, you're doing awesome. Thanks for being on the show with us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Christine.
So, I mean, I don't mean to be like in awe of that, but I've started many companies and we're yet to reach $500 million on any of the companies, or even if you add them all together. So tell me more about this.
So it's interesting. I'm in awe when you say that. It's like seeing, and what's really wild is it looks like an overnight grand slam, because this was a napkin. It was an idea at a lunch just over 2 years ago. And today we have a manufacturing facility here in Arizona that is about ready to come online. Our second one is underway south of this location. And really what this tells me is that I finally figured out how to focus and finally figured out what it looks like to have a world-class team with a world-class idea that is on a mission. It's like all these things came together, and I've been doing what I'm doing for 25, 30 years. And the other people around on this team have been doing their thing, their expertise, their narrow niche for 20, 30, 40, even 50 years, like our patriarch that came up with this whole wild invention and that is responsible for the patents. So it's a perfect storm, if you will. I think that anybody has the capacity or ability to get to a 500 million or $1 billion, if you're willing to do all the things and stub your toes and lose your $500 and your 50,000 and your 500,000. And like, you have to be willing to go through unbelievable amounts of pain. That's the difference. Most people don't want the pain. So they're like, well, how come I haven't done this? You probably haven't bled enough. I mean, I hate to say it because it sucks, but it's also reality. And that's, from my experience, that's normal.
Right. So it's the overnight success that actually took, right? The overnight success that was 30 years in the making or whatever. Right?
It's always that way. I refer back to the idea of hunting versus farming. And most people, that my experience is, people want to shoot something and I'm like, yeah, and you can eat it. And then you have to go do it again. Right. And you're going to be hungry. You're going to be cold in the winter. And then there's farming, where you have this opportunity to do things, and it takes years, sometimes generations. So different philosophy, and the big, generally, other than the lottery events like a WhatsApp or some of these tech companies, generally whatever it is that's big and meaningful takes a long time, and you have to be hyper committed, narrowly focused, and resilient with all the chaos and the pain and the disruption, because there is no straight line to this thing.
Well, and it's as much about you becoming the person who could be part of a $500 million creation, as well as being, right, every time you fail, every time you do something, that just adds a skill. Okay, not going to do that again. Now.
That's it. That's one of the key things. It's not necessarily about going to school, getting a degree, or seeing the right opportunity. You have to be the right opportunity. Like, just like you said, you have to get to that place. And the 70 companies, every one of those there was an opportunity and a lesson that I needed to get to where I am. And all the people, my partners, and the team that operates the plant and is building this, and all of them had to go through those things and become the right person. So that's probably has more to do with the success than the actual idea. Ideas are worth maybe 1%, 2%, 3% of the value of something. The rest of it has to do with execution, and that's based on the people and what they've been doing the last 2, 3, 4, 5 decades.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about it. Tell us all about this awesome thing that you're creating.
So what's really kind of funny is that this thing came to my partner and I about 3 years ago. We were told there's this great deal, a friend of mine from about 30 years ago, and he said, you got to look at this thing. And I said, I mean, thanks, but sure, just show it to me. So he hands it to me in the fall of 2022, 2021. And I said, thanks. And he said, you going to look at it? And I said, I'll get to it. We didn't look at it for 6 months. And finally we looked at it and we said, there's got to be something wrong here. It was this idea that the construction industry had really not evolved in 50 years. The last major invention was the nail gun. And we have a huge problem. I mean, truly, we're not building enough. We have 4, 5, 6, 7 million houses or units that need to be built in America to satisfy the demand. And that
Yeah.
was before all of the immigration that's happened. So we're probably 10 million plus units that are needed right now. And we just don't have the capacity. And so there's a problem. And what's happening is the industry is not innovating. So it's not really keeping up. It's not even keeping up with current demand, let alone previous demand and pent up. So this idea was to take the framing component, which is usually the biggest, hairiest, gnarliest part of this whole thing with building houses and apartments, and create a very, very efficient automated process inside of a plant and vertically integrate the whole thing. So the end result, just kind of skip into that, is that you have somebody that says, okay, I have a house or a collection of houses or an apartment. Here are my plans. We take those plans into our plant, convert them to our CAD, and then build all of the pieces inside the plant, doing this with 99% less waste than normal. So normally a house would have like 3 dumpsters full of wood. We have a trash can full of sawdust. So we build this whole thing. We do it 5 times faster than you would normally frame. And then we bring all the pieces out and we stand it up. And this whole process for a house takes a couple of weeks. So this isn't an incremental change to help get more houses and more housing units built. This is an exponential disruption, which has the whole country paying attention. The builders and the suppliers are all watching, going, if this is real, and it is real, we're about to go online and be producing in a few months. It changes construction in America, probably the world. And it's because these guys had this idea that they could do something way better if they had the right team and the right money. And that normally it's really hard if you have a great idea, but you haven't proven it except in your head, not many people want to hand you $60 million. And,
True.
and so that's what they
I've tried.
needed. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty challenging. And one of the funniest things, I've heard this multiple times. People will say, well, if you want to be a part of this, that'd be great. But we've got a billionaire we're talking to. I'm like, does everybody have a cousin billionaire? Like, it's just the damnedest thing. I don't think that that's really true, but it's a fun thing to hear, or at least to say. And ultimately what it took was a community of people that had built relationships with us and trusted us and said, we want to do what you're doing. We like this idea. We like you. We've done business with you for years. And that's the secret. A lot of people go, well, how does this happen? How do you have tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that just magically happen? It doesn't. It takes years of showing people how you perform. And that's how people will literally say yes when you say, I have a question. They're just like, yes, whatever you need, because you've built the relationship. That's the secret sauce.
Right. Absolutely. So now how does Frametec compare to like a modular type home?
It's a great question. So modulars are basically, you have a manufacturer, and one of the funniest things, people will say, well, what's the competition? I'm like, we anybody that's out there that is building, we embrace. We're not competing with anybody, because there's such a massive supply issue.
Yeah.
And it's different things. So 92% of houses and apartments are built traditionally with stick framing and components. And then there's this small niche of housing with manufactured. And for people that say, okay, I want one of 5 houses, these manufacturing facilities can build those things. What we're doing is we're building the bones, if you will, all the floors, the walls, and the roof trusses, all the bones, and doing the entire process for anything, custom house, track houses, apartments. So you give us the plans and we do that. Manufacturing says, pick one of these 5 houses, pick your colors and your fixtures. Very, very different model. So we've got this niche that is really most of the market. And then manufacturing houses, modular, those type of things, tiny homes, those are all helping to fill the need. 3D printing, all of these are useful in solving this problem. I don't really feel like we're competing with anybody. I think everybody's trying to cooperate to solve this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the process itself, is that the major variation is that it doesn't matter what the thing looks like. You're going to be able to create it.
Yeah. I mean, literally, when you think about 92% of the houses that are framed with sticks, and then you have this process that's archaic, and the legacy process of cutting off 2-foot pieces of boards and throwing them away, and doing this in the sun and the wind, and people not showing up, and people stealing a wall per house. Like, that's actually the stat. Like, there's an average of 1 wall per house that is stolen on a job site. And so you
Yeah.
start looking at all these things and you go, we're wasting all this. We're getting this loss. It's delays. People don't show up. They get hurt. Like just all this stuff. And it's a very different, it's a different process that it also, what's cool is we're creating a better work environment because we use automation. We're going to be the most technologically advanced plant in America
Yeah.
for manufacturing this type of stuff. And we're incorporating robots and automation to take out these things that hurt people. There's a
Yeah.
lot of processes when you're building a truss and you're throwing wood down and you're putting these really sharp pieces of metal that attach all the pieces of wood and you're smashing those with hammers. A lot
Yeah.
of people get their fingers smashed and they're hurting their back. We've taken a lot of that stuff out so that we're protecting our people, creating a culture where people are actually going to be able to do it for many, many years instead of like 6 months and then they're in the hospital. So I think that
Yeah.
that's really useful as part of the innovation to support the people, the community, and the culture of the workers that are going to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very backbreaking. You don't meet a lot of, I mean, I do actually meet a lot of old carpenters, but they're pretty unhealthy.
It's
Or,
hard.
yeah, my knee hurts, my back hurts, my
Everything
this hurts,
hurts.
my that hurts, right?
No, and people aren't really going into that space as much as they used to, and the old
Yeah.
timers, if you will, are stopping because they're pretty beat up, and so we have to think about things differently if we're going to continue to provide housing, which we have to. If the question is what's it going to look like, and what it's
Right.
going to look like is Frametech.
Yeah. So the skeleton gets delivered, and then the regular guys who you're used to seeing, the plasters, the drywall guy, all those people then show up and finish the job.
Yeah, what's really cool is that we can say, okay, you're going to give us your plans for your house, and we're going to tell you on this date we're going to deliver it. It's going to be 2 weeks or whatever the date is. And so you say, great, we can line up our electricians, our plumbers, our drywallers, our painters,
Yeah.
because they're all reliant. The problem is most of the time builders are thinking, okay, when we get the framing done, then we have to plan because you can't plan an electrician if the walls aren't up.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
you have these huge delays, and that costs money, it costs time, and all of our stuff is very predictable. And so everybody gets more efficient. Like, and all the trades love the fact that when we frame things in this plant, our tolerances are 1/32 of an inch. So everything is going to line up every single time. Inspectors love it because it's the same thing over and over again. Plumbers aren't trying to figure out if the walls are slightly off and they have to do things. We actually are snapping lines on walls. So people are going to be able to say, oh, there's where the plate, there's where the hole, there's like, it's
Right.
so it's helping everybody else. We're thinking about the whole process because all these guys have been involved in this industry for decades and they know the pain points. So we're solving those in advance. So everybody's going to say all we want to work with is Frametech. That because that's the best. I mean, clearly it will be the best. There's not even a close second.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I've worked on a lot of remodels of old homes, and you just like, I mean, I've had kitchens where the countertop has to go under the sheetrock because there's just otherwise the whole kitchen is so out of square that there's just no way you're going to get this nice square piece of granite to go into that corner. It's just not happening.
And then that doesn't even, I mean, I've seen the same thing in really high end homes. It doesn't really make any difference. The value, it's just, it's sort of like accepted in industry that you're not going to have things that are square. They're going to be off. And we see the world differently. We see that we can do better, but you can't just do an incremental change. There's a book called 10X is easier than 2X by Dan Sullivan. And
Yeah,
it's truly when you're thinking about disrupting something, oftentimes it's easier just to start over instead of dragging the legacy thinking and the legacy processes along. You say, okay, from ground zero, and I call this the blank slate principle. From blank slate, what makes sense today, given everything we know, and then you don't just drag your stuff. And it's kind of like when you move and you have all this furniture that doesn't really fit, and you have all these artifacts from your
yeah,
life,
no,
and you're like you dump it into your new house, and you're like, oh God, and instead. And most people do that and then they start pulling things out. What I like doing when I've moved is I show up and I go, okay, what do I want in here? And I pick the things that I want in, and everything else just gets donated. And so it's
yeah.
kind of like the old ideas, the old processes. Does it work for our new idea? And if it doesn't, you just throw it away.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the Uber, right? It's like if we were doing this from scratch, if we were creating a taxi company from scratch, would we have a bunch of guys, like, no, you'd have this model where you don't have to own any vehicles and you don't have to, do you know what I mean? It's like this whole rethinking because you just threw out everything that, because we've always done it this way. I used
It's
to be in,
you're
sorry, go
what?
ahead. Well, I was just going to say I used to work in the software industry and, I'd show up at a bank and they've got this legacy software and you're like, looking at it, scratching your head, going, well, why do you do that? Like, why does this person have two computers on their thing? Oh, because there's this one's so slow that they can do work on the other one at the same time. It's like, seriously, no, why don't you like get more memory for that one? You know what I mean? Like you're just thinking like, okay, yes. And the answer was always, well, that's the way we've always done it. Like, that's not a reason. That's just not a reason.
We tend to be creatures of habit. It's I use this example and it probably hits some people in a hard place. But why do people stay in abusive relationships? Because they're used to it. Like they've gotten used to it, and it's the unknown is so much more dangerous in our minds than the thing that's predictable. Even if it hurts a little bit, at least it's a known pain. So the slow computer or the archaic way of putting wood around in a really gnarly plant. We just That's what people do because it takes so much energy to shift. It's momentum. I mean, this is like one of the laws of physics. To change something, you have to put a lot of energy and push it in a different direction. Otherwise, natural momentum keeps it going.
Right.
So it takes visionary thinking and a lot of energy, a lot of fuel, and an unbelievable commitment to create Uber or create Frametech or do these things that change the world. And then we go, how did we ever do it without this? But it takes something very unique, and it kind of takes the crazy. Like Steve Jobs talked about that. Like we need dreamers. We need people that are a little bit crazy compared to their contemporaries, that are willing to do the things that don't make any sense to anybody except them inside their head. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's so cool. Why didn't I think of that? It's like, well, actually, a lot of people think about the things, but it's executing those things and being willing to stand alone, which you often have to do. I mean, a lot of the companies that I've started, they were a little bit crazy, and people were like, "This is stupid." I got pushed back for years that I wasn't doing the traditional going to college thing. I mean, I tried going to college. I got thrown out because I started a bookstore on campus that put the other bookstore out of business. So, like, nothing I do that's contemporary or normal wherever works, and the universe keeps going, no, 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 wrong. Get on the right path. And I didn't know what it was until I think I finally figured out when you get tailwinds like this,
Yeah,
you're probably on the right path. It's the universe
absolutely.
nudging you.
Yeah. Well, and what you realized was that, and what so many people don't realize, like you're asking the wrong question, right? You didn't come in and say, how can we make taxi drivers more efficient? You went a step back and said, how can we, you didn't say, how can we make stick building better for the carpenter? No, you said, okay, the big goal is to build a home. What's the most efficient way with all our new technology and all our new way of thinking? Right. So you just took a step back, which, there's a lot of forest for the trees things going on in a lot of people's mindsets, right?
That's exactly what happens.
Yeah,
You do have
absolutely.
to step back, and you have to ask what the ultimate outcome is. I think most people they get into the weeds, they start working on the weeds, and they don't actually jump up and look around and see what the whole landscape is. It's and that so there's two different types of people. There are people that are doing the things in the weeds, and there are people that are up in the clouds, and all they see. Typically, those are not the same person. It's very
Right.
unusual. Somebody called me one time. They called me a unicorn. They said, "You're a unicorn because you actually can go 30,000 feet to 30 inches, and you can be in both places. You can do it almost simultaneously, which is incredibly weird." And I that's but you have to have both of those parties. What I've found is a lot of times people get so excited about the thinking part, they want to go into the clouds, but then nobody does any work.
Right.
And then some people are in the weeds and they're doing the work and they can never see a bigger vision. So their past ends up becoming a replay over and over. Sequel and the trilogy is the same thing. It's the same movie over and over again. So like you have to be able to move. And how do you do that? You get around people that do those things and you start building you, like you said in the beginning. It's about you designing you differently and building you. And no easier way to do that than getting around the people that are the way that you're trying to become.
Absolutely true, because that's what I'm sure one of your gurus said to you, just as one of my gurus said to you. If you're following the wrong group, right? I mean, if you, oh, I want to fit in. Well, normally the people you're trying to fit in with are like the 95%, right? They're everybody else who's just ordinary worker bees who are just doing their thing. You don't want to fit in with that group. You want to go into the misfit group and fit in with them because they're the ones who are thinking out of the box and doing crazy things and having a great time too, right? I mean, it's fun. It's
I think there's a primal instinct to stay inside of tribes when you see animal packs. And why do
right.
animals stay in packs? Because when they go off on their own, they get eaten. And humans have the same basic primal instinct because millions of years ago, that's what we were doing too. If you went off into the wild by yourself, you typically had something eat you or kill you. And so we
Right.
tend to think the same thing. So we want to be surrounded by people that are thinking, doing the same thing, so we don't get hammered or judged. That's probably the biggest thing that I've watched over my entire life. And starting when we were kids, if you didn't get your 70 or 80% right, you got judged. You were a failure. And so now it's like everybody doesn't want to be a failure. They don't want to be laughed at. And I mean, sadly, there's so much of that happening. You see a lot of these teenage kids that are like committing suicide because they're so judged and bullied. And um, there's something to be said about blending in, and it's kind of a survival instinct. We tend to do it. So I say, great, blend in with crazy people, like you just said. Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
then you've got people around you. It's lonely being an entrepreneur, being at the top of the mountain and then falling off the thing a few times. It's a lonely, painful process, and it is kind of nice to have people around you. So I think a lot of people don't go into that space. They don't go into the woods because they've watched The Princess Bride too many times, and they're like, that big rat is going to eat me. It's like everything's going to eat you, and reality is most things don't. In 2008, I had a real estate empire. I thought it was pretty important, and it was worth millions of dollars. And then in 12 months, I lost 20 million and or
Bummer.
25 million, ended up being homeless, lost my house, my dog, my girlfriend. Like my life was a damn country song. And uh, it was, I probably
Guy ran
shouldn't
him a
have,
check.
yeah, it was crazy. What I realized though is, wow, okay, I didn't die and nothing ate me. And that was a process of developing some scar tissue and some wisdom. And wisdom is what comes from the hard stuff. It's not really the easy stuff. We don't really remember the easy stuff. We don't remember the things that we got right as much as we remember the ones we got wrong, and the pain. And that's what allows us to deconstruct and then build up better. It's kind of like when you go to the gym and you break muscle down and then you build back, you build something bigger, better. Same thing when you go through a process like that. And most people are afraid of making that mistake. They're like, I don't want to lose my money. I don't want to be laughed at. And then we end up on a merry-go-round. It's like Groundhog Day. And so I just learned that it doesn't really make any difference. And at the end of the day, most people are so focused on their own stuff, they really aren't paying attention to you that much anyway, unless you're constantly posting on Instagram. And then they're probably just, looking at
Failed
you and
again.
laughing at
Damn.
you. Like, so I think we just take ourselves too seriously. I think it's if you can put your head down and get excited about something. It doesn't necessarily, and let me make this really clear. I don't believe in this idea of just going and following your passion and everything will happen and money will fall from the sky. That's not reality. Reality is we need a mission. If you're going to feel fulfilled, there's a great book I just read called Halftime by Jim Buford, and he talks about the difference between success and significance. And if you find that mission that brings this deep significance and this impact on other people, ultimately it's not always going to be fun. It's not always going to be easy. You may have some passion there, but you'll have deep fulfillment. And you'll wake up even when things are hard and you're going to say, I can't wait to start my day versus, oh my God, is it Monday? And so that's one of those misnomers that really has messed up an entire generation and probably many generations. This idea that follow your passion and everything else will work. If you like making buggy whips and you think that that's going to be a good idea, you're going to be miserable and broke. And maybe you make one and it's really cool, but you're also going to starve to death. And so you're not really, and it's not that you're focusing on money. You need to focus on serving other people. Like we're here to serve other people. That we're not here to be hedonists. I think that that's true because I was a great hedonist, and it was not why I was here. But I had to go through that process to learn that ultimately there's incredible joy when you're on a mission and you get so consumed. There's this obsession, which I think is very healthy. It's Cardone talks about this in Be Obsessed or Be Average. And like, there's nobody that's going to say, I had this incredible thing I worked on my whole life and it was deeply fulfilling and I shouldn't have done it. I should have gone out there and made more money. They're going to be like, my
Right.
life. I mean, it's just, but we don't think about that stuff. We're constantly chasing these dollars and the accolades and the stuff that's not really getting us anything except maybe some success that's really shallow and hollow. And I don't think that's what people really want. They just don't realize it.
Yeah. And I feel like we have to be challenged, like you say. I mean, if we're just like, you can't, if all you're doing is stuff you like to do, I'm just, well, I really like to do this and that's what I'm going to do. It's like, you're not growing, you're not evolving. You need to do stuff that makes you be more, makes you do more, makes you learn more. I mean, I feel like we're here to grow and evolve and just push the envelope.
We're the only species, really funny, that lives up to half our potential. Most people are like, oh, I'm good. I'm going to retire, or I'm going to do half this, or I'm going to chill out. If you go into nature, do you ever see a tree that says I'm going to grow halfway to my potential? Like it just keeps going. But we're funny. We have this frontal lobe that makes us think that that's a good idea, and then we wonder why we're so bored. And most people, and not everybody, but most people in retirement or in the place where they stop contributing, they're generally not very happy. What they tend to do is obsess about the news and all the negativity that traps their brain into this cycle of deception around the world is really bad. And that's depressing, and it's horrible. And that's because we don't have anything that we can only focus on one thing at a time. People say, I can do two things at once. No, you can't. Consciously, you can do one thing. Subconsciously, you can do a million things. But that's, consciously, this idea is, well, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to freak out about whatever's happening in, the other side of the world or the politics or something. And yeah, people tell me about that stuff. And I'm like, got it. And I'll take about an ounce of that. And then I'm like, okay, stop. Because right now that's taking up my brain space, and my brain space needs to be working on something that's doing something positive, not listening to your drama. And that's where most people unfortunately live. It's online drama, it's television drama, it's their own drama. We're drama. We have this drama hook. We love the drama, and it makes us feel like something, like we're connected to something. And when you connect to something you're building, everything changes. Like you actually wake up excited versus depressed.
Yeah. You remind me of an episode of Sherlock Holmes where he's Watson's trying to tell him some factoid, and he's like, stop, stop, stop. Yeah, I've only got so much room in my brain and I don't want to fill it with useless information. It's like, exactly.
You have to disrupt people. I mean, it's awkward when people are going off, and sometimes you have really close friends, family, and this is their norm, and maybe they don't even realize it, and you might offend them, and reality is they might be irritated at you, but you've got to protect your mind. And if you don't protect your mind, you're basically going to turn into mush. I mean, that's just reality. So if you're good with mush, then by all means, let anything come in. But otherwise, you need to put up a moat and a gate and sharks and guards and protect that thing, because that's where all the impact happens. It starts up in the mind, and if it's full of this toxic goo, then you're going to get to the end of your life, and you're going to feel like, wow, I really didn't do the thing I was here to do. That happened with my dad years ago, before he died, about a decade ago. We had this conversation, and a few weeks before he died, and he said, there were so many things that I wanted to do. We cried for a while, and I realized, God, that's what regret feels like. And he doesn't have any more time to fix it. And he passed away, and it was one of those searing tattoos on my soul that lives with me. And I think about that all the time. And when I see people that are heading down that path, I will purposefully disrupt them and say, whoa, wait, what are you doing? And people fight. They fight back to maintain their path. Like, I'm going to do this path, and they don't want to do the thing because they're too busy, and they have kids, and they have all these excuses. And I'm like, you're going to feel real bad in about 10 or 20 years at the end. But it is probably the worst. It's hell on earth to meet the person that you could have been in your mind at the end of your life, just because you've been tiptoeing safely to death's door. And that's what most people are doing, sadly. But we all have a choice.
It's so true. Yeah, absolutely true. So for the entrepreneurs that are listening, we have a lot of entrepreneurs in the audience, the entrepreneurs who are listening who are maybe not. So what do you think is there anything or a few things that you feel like you did with this business that are a little bit different, or a little like advice or nuances or something that you could sort of share with the audience of people who are, they have a business, they've actually started it, but it's just not performing the way they want it to? I mean, what's your advice to that person?
The difference between successful people and ultra successful people is that ultra successful people say no to almost everything. And the difference here, I talked to a very dear friend that I've known for close to 30 years this morning, and he said, I don't think I've ever, in fact, I've never heard you this focused. You're just like, you're narrow. And I said, yeah. And I'm having a ton of fun, and it's hard, but there's deep meaning to it. And so that's one of the big switches. So I have other companies that are being run by other people, and I'm not sitting there trying to micromanage. The big difference here is there are incredibly talented people that are running things. I know what my job is. My job is to stay focused on my job and do the thing. And there's this ferociousness around being committed to the thing and whatever it takes. Very rarely do I see people, most employees don't do it, and even business owners end up cheating on their business. They're out doing other things. And I'm like, look, if you want something different in your life, and a lot of people are just fine, they accept reality. But if you want something different, you want a bigger business, you want more resources, you want whatever it is you want, you have to become obsessed and narrowly focused. And you got to stop cheating on things. When people say, well, I've got 7 different businesses, and they're running all of them, I'm like, you're not doing anything. You're definitely not making any money. And that's the difference. Frametech was going all in, and no matter what it takes. I tell my team all the time, if an investor needs something, if there's an emergency, I'm available 24/7. Doesn't matter if I'm sleeping. And most people do not want to make that commitment because they're just not that committed. And they say, well, I've got all these other things. Well, I've got one thing that's more important than all the other things. And the only thing that's more important than Frametech is my health. So my health is first. I made that mistake. And then before where I just said, oh, the only thing that matters is the business. And that's a problem because if you're dead or you're sick, like you
Right.
can't really do anything.
Not very
So
effective.
but you get your health in order. So that was a big part of Frametech, shifting gears. And then whatever it takes. Like I'm not going and spending time on vacation right now in the middle of this thing. People, there's this misnomer about a well-balanced life. And balance is BS. It is, you can have harmony, but you're going to have seasons. And there are going to be times where it's like this is all you're doing. And sometimes it's like all you're doing is nothing. You're literally sitting on a beach or you're doing something that does get old. I mean, anybody that's tried it, there's like only so many pina coladas you can do, and before you're like, okay, God, stop, this is terrible. But that's the difference. The season right now is this unusually intense obsession with making this thing, doing whatever it takes to get it up and running and to make it successful. And really, we've got tailwinds because there's a bunch of people that are thinking the same way. So all that energy collectively is
Yeah.
like an afterburner. I just don't see that very often. I see people trying to balance. And it's like, so you're going to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of that. So then you just have this big bunch of stuff and you don't have, you're not lasering anything. You're literally just putting light on a bunch of different stuff. And there's time for, you're going to do different things at different times. I think people are trying to do too many things simultaneously and ultimately you don't get anywhere. And that is the big difference. It's the time that was taken to build up me and the other team members. And then it was us doing this one thing. I see a lot of people that are doing investing, they do businesses, and they're like they got a little piece of it, and they're like kind of dancing around, and they got a little piece of this and that, and then they wonder why nothing really happens. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, one, providence isn't ensuing because there's no commitment. You've got this thing, and if it dies, it's like, oh, no big deal. Frametech can't die. Like everybody dies with it. We're on this ship, and like there is no, we've burned all the bridges. Like
Yeah.
everybody
You're not
here,
covering your bet, you're not hedging your bets, you're not
there's
covering
no
your
hedging.
butt, you're not, diversifying. You're like, this is it. Shh, this is what
and
we're
and and,
doing.
and that's quite frank. I talk about hedging a lot because I have a gold and silver company, and we talk about hedging against markets and irrational governments and all this kind of stuff. I think that's important. It's so there's two phases. Actually there's three. There's a security phase where you build up wealth and financial resources. There's security, and then there's a comfortable phase, and then there's a rich, and then you can push past into ultra rich. Felix Dennis talks a lot about this and these different levels of wealth in terms of money, because money is just resource, it's just fuel to energy.
Energy.
and and so you can really pick, okay, which one it makes sense. You need to have a foundation. Crazy people say I'm going straight for rich. I don't know if I'm going to have a roof over my head, but they just go and they say I want to be rich. That's a little bit nuts and can work. But what makes a lot of sense is cover your basis, but just make sure your basis, like make sure your security is not so overwhelming that you have to feed that thing your entire life and you never get to push to comfort and rich. So
Yeah.
you get the security, and there's hedging and comfort, and like you move through that, and then you get these things in place and you have some sense of, okay, I'm not going to starve to death next week. Because what I've noticed is when people are on the edge and I mean, 60% of the population in America doesn't have $600 for an emergency. So everybody's on the edge. When I say everybody, more than half the people they can't even afford in their mind to put energy into something that doesn't pay them 2 weeks from now. They have to be doing something all the time. It's hand to mouth. It's like
Yeah.
everybody's a bunch of crackheads. And I say that lovingly, but we are. Like we need the next hit of money because we don't have any. We don't have any. Our behaviors are not helping us. Our habits of consuming everything. We've fallen subject to Parkinson's law, where all of our whatever income we have, our expenses somehow meet it all the time. And so if you can push yourself past that and develop a runway where you have some bandwidth, and what I mean by that is you've got resources or you've got income that's coming in without you having to go trade all of your time and be worn out. You
Right.
can actually start building something without saying, well, how much am I getting paid? One of the things that I love and I almost never see it is if somebody that shows up and says, I want to learn and I'm going to start doing these things. I'm going to start providing value. And what I want from you is the opportunity to provide value to you. Not, I want a paycheck. Almost nobody does that because they're addicted to money. And when you shift away from that, all of a sudden opportunity shows up. You become invaluable. Like my friend Hayden Crabtree, this guy went out there and just started creating value for a mini storage investor. And then he became a partner because he was creating all this value. He didn't even ask for anything. He just showed up. So do people do that? No, because everybody wants cash, and they're like, how do I say this? They're whores. Like they literally are like, I have to have cash. I'm turning tricks. And that's a
Yeah.
hardcore way of looking at it. But when you let go of the money stuff, it's unbelievable how much wealth can happen in all the different ways. The relationships deepen, the financial stuff starts to happen at a way at a rate that is unprecedented, but you have to let go. Like if you're a monkey with your hands around a banana or a coconut, you get stuck just like they do in the wild. They get stuck. They won't let go of the thing. And if you let go of that thing, all of a sudden you can open yourself up and you're free to create. And I think that that's the missing piece for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Excellent. So, I mean, that's kind of the answer, I guess, to my normal question, like words of wisdom, things you want to. But let me ask you, is because we're kind of getting to the end, unfortunately, of our wonderful conversation. But is there anything that you wish that I would have asked you that I haven't asked you, something that you want to make sure people come away with?
Well, here's the thing, and this is what really started a lot of this a decade ago with the EQRP company. That company was based on the idea of bringing people together and creating community and empowering people to break their financial shackles. And this was done through the retirement system because most people at the end of, they work and then they say, okay, if I'm going to retire, if you will, they say, well, I need to have my retirement account, my 401k IRA is the only thing I'm going to have because they're not going to eat their house and Social Security is a joke. Like it's minimal. So, but they're hoping that they're going to have enough resources. So when I started that company a decade ago, the idea there was I'm going to create an opportunity for people. I'm going to nurture them. I'm going to love on them and bring them together. And so building communities and a community with a real deep mission of communicating, bringing people together and serving them, no matter what we're doing. Anybody that's listening, watching, if you start thinking about the world in that way, how can you bring people together? How can you serve them? There things really change. That's why all the other stuff happened because the original intention there wasn't, I'm going to go sell something to somebody. It was, I'm going to go give people a tool and then I'm going to show them how to do it. I'm going to give them options. Then I'm going to bring people that are doing that together and then they get better together and communities thrive. So the parting advice I'll give everybody is find that for you in your local community online. Find something that you can serve people. And instead of saying, I'm just going to go out there and I'm going to sell this thing, then you're literally turning tricks. Instead, don't be transactional, be very relational and find ways to serve people and serve them. Here's one of the funniest things. Don't ask somebody how you can help them. Go figure out what their problem is and go do it. Just solve it and pay attention. And then they'll go, wow, I didn't even ask for that. Somebody asked me, people ask me all the time, well, what can I do for you? And I mean, I appreciate it's not like a bad question, except it kind of is because I'm so busy thinking about solving my stuff. You're asking me to do another job. Like, okay, I'm going to think about what you're going to do. And then you're probably not going to do it anyway. So like, I'm going to waste time doing that. But somebody that shows up and just starts solving a problem, I, you want to talk about somebody that I'm just going to be eating out of their hand. Whatever I can do to like naturally reciprocity kicks in. I mean, Cialdini talks about this in Influence. I'm going to want to just reciprocate. I'm going to want to have this person close because their energy is pure love and giving and connection. And I don't feel like they're trying to rip a hole out of me. And that's what most people approach life at, and they approach other people and employers and partners. It's like, okay, what can I get? It's like wrong question. Go
Right.
figure out what you can deliver and give, and go do it in advance, and then watch. It's amazing.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Damien. So, how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more, if they want to just absorb some of your energy, if they want to become an investor, if they want to join EQRP?
The stuff that we talked about, Frametech, check out frametech.com. It's tec.com. There's another company with metal studs that's TECH, but it's Frametech. You'll see us, you'll see our video. It's a great model for positivity and production and creation. There's opportunities to invest in it for what we're doing. And so I think it's just a really useful thing to learn from it for whatever your purposes are. And then, find me on LinkedIn, connect with me and reach out and say hi. And you'll hear
Excellent.
me rant and ramble on financial underdogs. So whatever is useful for you, you're going to bump into the different things that I've been blessed to be a part of. Whatever resonates, go connect with that thing. And if you say, you know what, my retirement's looking kind of ugly, I need to know more about getting out of Wall Street. Great, go check out EQRP. There's a place. Everything I've done the last 15 years has been about finding ways to give people more freedom because ultimately that's my highest, most important thing in my life is freedom. And so it's not just for me. The more freedom I give other people, it's like Zig Ziglar used to say, if you can have it, whatever you want is like, just give enough people what they want and you'll get whatever you want. Same thing with freedom. My job is to give other people more freedom. The more freedom I give other people, the more freedom I get. So that's what you're going to see. Everything that's out there that I'm doing, from retirement accounts to Frametech to gold and silver to whatever, it's all about freedom. There's a common thread that is amongst all of these different things, because I think our personal sovereignty and our freedom is the most important thing, and everything else thrives based on the amount of that we have.
Yeah, absolutely true. Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us today. I love all the energy that you've shared and all the great tips. And I just want to reiterate or repeat whatever your 2 tips for entrepreneurs whose businesses are just sort of like wallowing and waffling. Focus, say no to everything else, and just do whatever it takes.
That's
Words to
it.
live by.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much, Christine.
Thank you, Damion. And thank you, listener, for listening. How many people right now could you just sit down and write 5, 10 people who need to hear what Damion has to say? 50, 100? Write those names down and forward this episode to them right away, because they are going to thank you. They're going to be so grateful. And, give other people what they want and you'll get what you want. Have a fantastic week. Thanks for being here.